Hi everyone, Libros here, and welcome back to the show. This episode is brought to you by Riverside, an all-in-one recording and editing platform created for creators and podcasters like myself. Like, quite literally, without Riverside, I would not be able to bring to you the podcast and episodes every week, as this is the platform that I use to connect with guests and record episodes. It's such an amazing tool that has saved me so much time to produce episodes and bring them to you with an easy to use online studio and suite of AI tools where you can create clips for social media and so much more. If you are a fellow creator or podcaster like myself and would like to check out Rivers, then head to the link in the show notes of this episode where you can get 15% off your subscription. And please let me know how you get on using the platform. I would love to hear your experience using Riverside. As I said, it's been a game changer for me in bringing to you these episodes every week. Now, in terms of episodes, in this episode, I am joined by Andy Kozlowski as we discuss and dive into the topic of consciousness. Andy is a fascinating character and person who has spent more than 10,000 hours in meditation. And in this episode, he shares with us what he has learned from spending this amount of time in meditation, as well as exploring many other different methodologies and practices, mostly stemmed in ancient wisdom, actually a lot of which we've covered on the podcast over the last couple of weeks, from Qigong to breathwork to obviously meditation, and many others like Kung Fu. Andy is a huge fan of Kung Fu and how this practice helps us not just only with our health, but with our spirituality and connecting to that higher place within ourselves, which is all very fascinating. So we discuss all of this and more, including topics like duality, which if you haven't come across before, then this is a fascinating idea that wrap our heads around, and I'm looking forward to sharing this conversation with you today in this episode of the podcast. So without further ado, let's hop on over into my conversation with Andy, explore consciousness, his journey with 10,000 hours of meditation, and so much more. Andy, welcome to Raising Consciousness. How are you doing this morning? Is it morning where you are, afternoon?
Thank you, Luke, for having me. It's actually afternoon. It was very busy and hectic, but thankfully nothing lasts forever. And right now I'm here with you, about to have a fantastic conversation that could show people how they can raise their consciousness and awareness and transcend any of their limitations.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. Let's start with how you discovered, like, even the concept, the idea, and the phenomenon which is consciousness in itself. Like, where does your journey with consciousness begin? Because it's not necessarily something that, especially in the Western world and societies and cultures, that gets spoken about a lot. So I'm curious where your journey begins.
As the same way as our journey start, with the same step. And I get here to where I am right now because I made all the mistakes possible. And I wasn't always open with myself, embracing who I was, my thoughts, emotions, or actions. In the past, I was fighting myself very fiercely. I thought there was something wrong with me because what I experienced and what other people experienced was so different. I could sense more, I could feel more. So the conclusion that I came to, and which I thought was the only possible explanation, is that I'm crazy. So I started this search for Holy Grail that will make me whole again. I started exploring different modalities. From the West to the East, I've dabbled with things like psychology, dietetics, NLP, hypnosis, mindfulness techniques, Silva techniques, just so I could know what's wrong with me and why I'm experiencing the things I'm experiencing. And truth be told, that journey was destined to fail from the first step, because there is nothing wrong with me, and there wasn't anything wrong with them. Everything between heaven and earth is perfect because God doesn't make mistakes, and you are here for a reason to experience what the soul wants to experience. So you can just stop fighting and embrace who you are, and then truly magnificent things will start to happen in your life. There will be no longer energy loss because in your head you will be thinking, I need to do these things, I need to be this person. You can just let go and be yourself. So there wouldn't be any buffer, any friction between you and the universe. And you would be highly rewarded by the universe.
Just picking up on something you said there. You said just be yourself. So what does it mean for us to just be ourselves? Like, what does that actually mean?
To put some perspective into this topic, all humans are surrounded by this field called either aura or electrochemical field, which is result of thinking and feeling. Some spiritual people are able to see that aura, and it has a color, and that color is the result of the friction between what your ego creates with the universe. So it starts with the red one, because usually people, when start this journey of awareness, they are only concerned with their survival. And funny thing is, they usually don't live very long. When they go to the second level, they are focused on extending their species. Guess what? They usually don't have kids. So this journey on each level is very different, and on each level the color is different, as in manifestation of how it causes friction with the universe. And this friction is because we have some things in our head, in our mind, and we have some emotions in our internal organs that are either not processed, that are our wantings, that are our cravings, that are something that have been programmed into us, that are something that we got from our ancestors in form of their traumas or beliefs. And that is an illusion in the form of ego, which creates that friction. And that friction creates separation. So it's not only energy loss, it actually separates from the person that you want to be and from your goals, dreams, achievements. Because you can either live or you can think about living, but you cannot do both. It's like this dancer that is dancing and inspiring everyone in her sight. But as soon as she will start double guessing her, getting anxious, she will no longer have this ability to use her body so well, because she would be in her head. So you either dance or you think about dancing. So it means about getting outside of your head, actually starting doing things.
You've explored a lot of different practices and modalities, as you referenced beforehand, from more for obviously from here in the West to Eastern ideas. What has been the biggest contrast that you've seen, like, between the two? Like, what's the biggest difference between, like, how Eastern principles kind of, kind of just like see life, I guess, rather than compared to in the West, if that makes sense.
Just to give some general background, Ayurveda is around 5,000 years old. Our science is approximately 180 years old. Traditional Chinese medicine is approximately 3,000 years old. And teachings of esoteric Taoists are approximately 8,000 years old. So this is many times over than our science and our understanding on life. We are focused on things right here, right now. We are focused on the tip of the iceberg, but not what's underneath. We don't realize that to get to the top of the mountain, it takes many years of practice. But since we want everything right now, we aim to and tend to use the shortcuts. And since this world is based on duality, using shortcuts most likely will get you lost, and then it will be very hard to find. It's very common that people in our culture start to dabble with meditation. They don't have any effect whatsoever. So they then start doing very advanced meditation, which channel energy from the cosmos. And since they're not really beginners, what's going to happen is they're not have their channels open to channel that energy. So it is like using rocket fuel for your car. It might be very efficient, but your car won't drive on it. The same is with that energy. It will cause significant heat that will damage the internal organs. It's very similar to building the house starting from the roof and not caring about the foundation. So when you have no foundation and you have big roof, sooner or later that roof will fall on your head while you're eating breakfast with your family. And that is most often the case because since they don't know how to cope with that energy, it goes to the brain, makes them believe that somehow they are advanced due to that energy. But the thing is, they're not even beginners and they're decreasing their own lifespan to achieve things that they think they achieve. But in truth, they're very lost. And in our culture, we glorify those people and call them advanced because they tend to, what they say is they talk to angels or demons or any other energies. But in truth is, they speak with those energies because those energies are to help them because they are so lost. If you are in alignment with yourself, with your body, heart, and mind, there is absolutely no need to rely on guidance from any of those spirits. You can rely on your spirit, and that would be enough. That would actually be more than enough. But since we have this tendency to not only use the shortcuts, but want everything right here, right now. And again, this world is based on duality. So if we are using the short road, we will get the long road. But if people would actually choose the long road, they would find out that it's actually not that long and it becomes a very short road.
What's the shift that people go through in your experience to understand what you were talking about there? Because a lot of people do think very short term and that kind of culture that we live in, right? And so if I'm just trying to help that person right now who's listening to this and maybe they're coming up, they're understanding like what we're talking about, but their perspective, for so many years has been very focused on the culture that they've been brought up in, right? Like it's been their environment. So how do they start? Like, what's that shift that they need to go through?
Number one thing they need to know is why is that coming from? For example, some people may think that they're not enough and they need to achieve many things for them to feel that they are actually worthy. But once they start this journey and move matter through space, if they are lucky, they would experience those gains. But that won't fill the hole in their heart. It is a doomed journey. So all journeys need to start with understanding who you are and where are you going. Because even a great thing, a great idea can be wrong if it's backed by a wrong reason or intention. So if you are trying to achieve things just to make you feel whole, it won't fix you. It's actually an imbalance of the spleen in this scenario. The worrisome anxiety are emotions of the spleen and they need to be transformed. They need to be transformed into openness and fairness. And then this urge that they are not enough will vanish and new opportunities will become available without them even realizing that, because they would be operating on different level of awareness. Like, they wouldn't have this ball chained to their legs, dragging them down.
Interesting. And what's awareness for those who are at the beginning of their journey? Like, how do you describe awareness and consciousness to someone?
Your lesson is, can you focus your attention of your hands and see any sensation in them? Can you focus on your feet and feel any sensation? The thing is, there's always something going wrong, because that's life. Yet we are so occupied with our thoughts that we no longer focus on our awareness. And the more you do focus on awareness, what's going in your body, what you can sense with your senses, the more calm you will become. The more calm you will become, the more work you can do. The more work you can do, the better results you will have. Not only that, we are slave to the mind beliefs or habits, and the more conscious you are of yourself, of your sensation, of the universe, the weaker they got. Nothing lasts forever, and without energy to make them stronger, they will soon dissolve. So you can be free of any pesky thoughts, habits, beliefs that have been hindering you for so long. And it all starts just by letting go, sitting, perhaps not really needed to sit in a cross-legged position, but you can sit on a chair and just observe what thoughts are you having through the day, and who's thinking that thought. And that actually will bring your awareness to a high level, because you will be observing how the thought is created, due to which the higher the level of awareness, the easier it is to have an impact on your subconsciousness. It is said that masters can make changes to their subconsciousness beliefs or habits just by flicking their fingers, because it's so easy to them, because they operate constantly with their empty mind, and only an empty mind can be filled. If you're constantly occupied with thoughts, how is it possible for something new to happen? It's not. Humans have approximately 60 to 70 thoughts per day. And that itself is not the issue. The issue is that those thoughts are reoccurring, which leads you to the same words you say. And that leads you to the same actions, which leads you to the same experiences, which leads you to the same you. So if you truly want to change, if you want to raise your awareness, start with your thoughts, with your emotion. See if those thoughts or emotions truly serve you, and if it's something you want to take with you to the next stage of your life. If the answer is no, you need to learn how to let go and how to transmute that energy into something that would be of use to you on your journey through life.
In some spiritual communities or sections, it's been said, or kind of some of the narrative is, well, when it comes to the mind, is quite negative, right? I'm wondering from your perspective, talking what we're talking about there, where do you stand on like our thoughts, the mind, our intellect, and like how do we use it, for our best life, I guess, like because yeah, there is kind of this narrative in some spiritual sections that demonate the mind, and so like I'm wondering how we, one, where you stand on it, and two, how we use it for our, for our growth, and yeah, to live our most best life while we're here.
So we need to understand what the mind is. And it is a tool. It is a tool for us to use to experience reality. We can say that it's process data, make decision, but on the deep level, it is a tool. So a tool is to be used, but if you allow the tool to use you, you're gonna end in the places where you don't want to go. And that is, if you think about it, that default state of humans should be to not allow any thoughts interfere with the process of your living, and then you confront it with the reality. It seems like we're all in this madness, this illusion or hallucination, and our minds do things whatever the mind wants to do with us, and it's not benefit no one apart from the ego, because the more you think, the stronger the ego becomes, the more matter you become and less energy. And this is very important, because when you want to achieve things, you cannot really think much. You just need to act. And just think about it. There are 60 or 70 thoughts per day. If that is energy, and that is actual energy, that's electricity running through your brain, if somehow you're able to decrease the number of thoughts, let's say to 10 or 20,000, it means the thoughts would be many times stronger than before. And those thoughts that are stronger now will lead you to stronger choices of life. And it is said that spiritually awake decreases the karma. It is also said in some Buddhism circles that the mind is like a drunken monkey jumping from tree to tree. So, like an animal, it needs to be tamed. So, it is a tool in your arsenal and not the other way around.
So how do you propose that we use our mind as a tool, and like how can we develop the awareness? Maybe through some of the practices you've already shared, or what are some practices that you found that can help us to catch ourselves in that moment of when our mind is using us and us not using the tool, if that makes sense.
So, to share more light on this, when we are using the mind and when the mind is using us, the difference is that if I'm gonna think right now during this podcast and I'm gonna think, what should I do in 3 months? Or I should get a dinner at 7 p.m. when it is only 3 for me. Is it really benefiting me? I'm not really conscious about what's going on. I'm losing focus. So it is a sign that the mind is using me and I start to daydream, which is not beneficial for the soul or for you on this journey. But if I would start, for example, I just come home and I'm hungry and I'm thinking whether I should eat a soup or a dinner. What should be more beneficial for me, soup or noodles? Or I should do this action right here, right now, or not. So if I'm using the tool of mind to determine whether something should be done right here, right now, it is a proper use of the tool. But if you think about the future, about the past, it is the mind using you. If you are thinking about right here, right now, you're using the tool properly, and there is absolutely nothing wrong about it. And how to use it properly? Well, all journey start with the first step, and there are countless ways to learn how to do that. You need to find something that works for you and stick to it. Usually people start with meditation and it's not exactly the right choice. Maybe if you do some esoteric Tao meditation, that would be very beneficial, but the meditation itself, again, is a tool. So if it's used for our benefit, that's perfectly fine. But for example, the tool called meditation amplifies the state that you're currently in. So if you're anxious or depressed, you start meditating, what's going to happen is you're going to be twice as anxious or depressed as before. So it's definitely not beneficial for you. Some people that are obsessed on growth of the spirit are like, I'm going to meditate 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening. Even when the whole universe tells them not to, but they do it anyway. And so what happens then is they brag about to their friends how enlightened they are because they meditate 1 hour in the morning or in the evening. And that is the only time they're actually conscious, because throughout the day they are not, because I don't need to be conscious because I'm gonna go back and start my meditation, which they lose the ability to connect to right here, right now, because they have plans. They have plans to use the tool of meditation, but they don't see that the tool of meditation is using them. So it's actually more beneficial in the first place to ensure that your mind is calm and only meditate during those times. And to ensure the mind is calm, you can participate in any activity that you enjoy and makes you grounded, such as dancing, such as Kung Fu, Tai Chi Chuan, Qigong, yoga, acro yoga, any activity outdoor without your shoes would be very well appreciated by the body and the internal organs.
Interesting. So there's two places I wanted to go with that. The first of which is when you said that the best way to use the mind is obviously focusing in on the present moment, not the past or the future. In the world, I guess, it's obviously, well, from my perspective, it's quite obviously, it's often encouraged, like we set goals and we visualize and create a vision for our life, so we have that direction and we know where we're going. Hearing that and kind of thinking about those messages and things that we've kind of been exposed to, like when we like that's very future present, right? Or future focused. So what where does the what's your thoughts on that? Like where do you stand on that? Do you feel like we should be setting those goals and that vision for our life and then almost like let it go type of thing, and then like focusing on the present moment because we've set that intention, and then every day show up in the present moment and take actions towards that? Then I want to come back to the meditation piece, but well, yeah, what's your thought on or experience kind of with that? Because in the world we live in, goal setting and visualization and creating a vision for your life is something that's shared with us, and something that can actually give us that direction and that purpose to move forward to basically the life that we want to create. And it just sounds like that's very future, well, it is very future led, and we're using the mind to look ahead.
Goal setting and thinking about the future is based on the past. So we're using our previous experiences to set goals, and maybe, just maybe, it will work when you invest enough time and energy to achieve those goals. But if you truly operate from right here, right now, you let go of any of your attachments or cravings, and you allow the flow of God to speak through you freely and be everywhere around you. What's going to happen is you're going to become a puppet of the God. But by allowing that to happen, you will also become a puppeteer of your own destiny, because you will no longer use only your energy to create things. You will use the energy of everything that is around you to create. Not only that, but every relation between everything with everything. The amount of energy that will be under your control will be limitless, and so your possibilities will be limitless. The hard thing for us is to understand that we can most likely only interfere with the process of creation, because even the smartest man alive isn't as smart as the power of the universe, because he's only like this small grain of sand on the desert, and the universe is the whole desert.
So when we talk about the universe, and we also use words like terms like God, etc., because a lot of people associate God with religion. Are you using those terms and words interchangeably?
Mhm. Yes, it's the same thing for me. I believe that God created humans on their image, And humans reciprocated and created gods on their image, which started this big mess of confusion. People call God differently, but in the end, it's the same universal power that speaks to all of us and uses us as a way to experience her or himself.
So do you not set goals for your own life?
Goals are like beliefs that I think I should get in order to be happy. And belief is just saying that I have this restriction, that I have this thing that unless I do it, I won't be happy. So we glorify the things that keep us tamed in a cage. And I always experience it when I want to achieve something, because that is my path of life, is to have no attachment. Is when I want to achieve something, God actually shows me way better things that I could have. And it's always like I have created this plan set in stone of what I should do. And then God's just laugh and look, this is much better. Why don't you do it? So the hardest thing is about actually keeping that energy to yourself to go into different level of awareness and consciousness and allow things to happen for you instead of grinding and struggling. When God created light, he didn't struggle, he didn't strive, he just said, let there be light, and light there was.
What would you say to someone who would see that way of approaching life as passive and giving it to chance rather than, I guess, what they're used to of like setting goals, knowing the direction they're going in, not leaving anything to chance, I guess, because especially in the modern world and kind of how we're the culture that we're in, it's all about measuring stuff or data and kind of all these things that like we have to measure our goals and our progress towards those goals and always making progress, etc. So they might see that this way of approaching life and living life is very passive and it's leaving it to chance. So what would you say to those people?
That approach is not very passive. Truth be told, it's very hard because you need to be aware as much as possible. So even when you're speaking with someone, some bit of your consciousness needs to stay within your body. When you go through life, you need some bit of your consciousness in your body while you do all the activities like eating, even breathing, working. You need a part of your consciousness in your body, so you need to be very aware. So truth be told, it's much harder than just setting goals, because setting goals satisfies the ego. It is a feel-good procrastination, but because if you truly have energy to do things, why don't you just do things instead of setting goals? You might set intention, direction in which you're going, but other than that, you cannot really plan what's going to happen in 3 months. Instead, you can use that energy, channel that energy to do the work right here, right now, and then just think, what would have better results if I'm going to work every day, or I'm going to have plans and goals that I'm going to set each day, or maybe once a month, 3 times a month? What's going to yield better results?
So are you a fan of like overall, maybe not setting really detailed goals, but setting intentions? And what would you say is the difference between the two?
Well, I'm a fan of actually creating from the void, using the power that flows through us for my benefit and giving me direction, which needs to be aligned with my mission. And my mission is to guide and serve others. So all is well. I don't have any detailed plans, just direction that I move. I used to pivot a lot when I had some plans about the things that I need to do, which often case was just my ego and my mind telling me that it would be good, it would be satisfactory to go and do those things. But those things usually yield no result when you're depleted of energy because you overthink. your results would also be depleted. But if you're full of life because you conserve that energy by being aware, your results also will be full of life. And it would truly be like, how did this happen? Because if you allow that universal power to do things for you, it can never be the way that you expect it to be. Because in a way, the way you want that to happen is a restriction, and that would never happen, because if it would be possible for it to happen that way, it would already happen. Because when you plan, when you have goals, you interfere with the process, not only from the point of the universal power, but even from your subconsciousness. You create more and more restrictions to your subconsciousness, and by having more and more restrictions, cannot operate fluently to give you what you desire. It's very similar to the process of dancing. If you think about dancing, you won't dance well, and you will fumble and you will drop, and that won't be a good dancing. But if you just dance and allow things to happen, well, that's a thing anyone would want to see and everyone would want to experience. But it's tough.
You mentioned beforehand how the universe, God, let's just use the term universe, can show up and give us like the signs of like the direction to move in or what to kind of work on and focus on in the moment. You know, it kind of lives through us. For people who may be having a hard time understanding this concept, how does that show up in their life? Like, can you pull on any examples from your own life or people you've worked with, or stories or whatever it is, where this actually shows up for people, like in their day-to-day life?
This big commotion starts with the fact that the soul wants to experience. And if you listen to the soul, she will give you direction. But we are so occupied with the ego that many times it takes several incarnations just to experience one thing. And sometimes, especially nowadays, people are so overwhelmed with information from each direction that they cannot process it correctly. And then what happens is they have dreams, and dreams are a way of our spirit saying things to our subconsciousness, in which direction should we move, or what should we aim for. That is a good way to see if what we want aligns with what the soul wants to experience. And what you also need to understand if you're listening to this, there are people born on different level of the soul, and the soul might want to experience different thing. Well, it all starts with survival, then it goes through the lenses of thoughts and emotions. So people experience reality through the lenses of their thoughts and emotions. And eventually the soul is mature enough to see the reality for what it truly is. So there's this window that opens between the eyebrows, and the soul takes peaks. And reality is something completely different, because the reality that we perceive has been created by our thoughts and emotions that are within us. So not only the things that we consciously think about, but it is the things that have been programmed to us by society, by TVs, streaming platforms, music, and also it has been given to us by our ancestors, their beliefs, their traumas, their experiences. And if somehow they weren't able to do what they were supposed to do, or go through some severe trauma, those beliefs will land on our shoulders to work through. And if we won't be able to work through that, it would be our children's responsibility to go through that. And then this is this cycle of life, which is called karma, which is called original sin, or recently through the religion of the man from the 21st century, epigenetics or science.
It sounds like, from my perspective, that this approach to life requires a lot of faith. And I think that a lot of people
Mm,
lack that faith and trust in the idea that the universe kind of like has a plan for me, let's say, or the universe knows, or there is something there is just like this part of us that already knows, Um, obviously for
mm.
me it kind of connects with like intuition and being able to listen to that part of ourselves and stuff. So why do you think that is? Like from your experience, why do you think people like overall lack
Hmm.
that faith? And actually, I guess the first question is, would
Hmm.
you agree with that? What's your thoughts on that? And then, yeah, like, what? Why do you think people have that challenge?
So, for example, when people start to practice martial arts, they train techniques, and with time, those techniques become skills. It's very similar to those wanting to grow their spirit. They need to learn modalities, and through modalities, they gain faith, which is actually the most important thing. When the faith is strong enough, there is no need for the modality. If your faith in being healthy or achieving your goals will be strong enough, it will be given to you. So, modalities, meditation, spiritual practices are just ways, are just techniques for you to develop the skill of faith. And once you have faith, you will be able to lift mountains.
Let's go back to what we were talking about in terms of meditation, because I was fascinated by some of the things you were saying there in terms of it might not be the best first step for people. Because I've kind of had a little bit of a different experience. So I was someone who, probably like 10 years ago, working a 9 to 5, working a job that I hated, very anxious, depressed, etc. And I discovered kind of, I would say like self-improvement kind of overall. I didn't want to go down like the traditional route of anxiety meds or something, right? Like I wanted to, I guess, quote unquote, heal myself, right? And so I discovered, practices like meditation. At the time, I wasn't eating that great or exercising, and kind of these other parts of us that we know that are good for us, especially on like a physical, biological level. And so, I came across meditation and started practicing. Initially, yeah, I was probably because I was experiencing the anxiety, was kind of I'm more aware of like all the racing thoughts and the anxiety in itself. But I do feel like from my own experience over time, continuing with the practice, it helps me to calm down. And now I notice a big difference when I meditate or when I don't, just generally in how I feel from an energetic kind of perspective. So so my experience kind of sounded different to what you were saying in terms of it might not be a good start for people or a good place for people to start. And I've heard something similar from somebody else I was talking to, and actually meditation might not be good for everyone in that sense, because you just become more aware of all of the racing thoughts in your mind because you're actually slowing down and stopping, right? And so when you slow down and stop, you become more aware of kind of the racing mind. So what? Yeah. So like, I wanted to bring that up because again, I might be repeating myself, but it kind of sounded contrast to what you were suggesting in terms of meditation being a place to start. So from my experience, kind of what I'm sharing now, what would you say to someone who maybe has a similar experience, or just your thoughts on that from, or obviously
Hmm.
wisdom that you've gathered in your own journey?
If meditation works for you, that's perfectly fine. There are many ways and means to reach a destination, and no mean is worse or better. It means that your journey will be different. If meditation works for you, perfectly fine. But be aware that the adepts of the East, where meditation came from, usually start with the body to open the pathways of the body. And when they are mature, they actually start to explore the mind instead of the body. And meditation itself has some significant side effects which people don't talk about. Well, first of all, you're probably gonna sit in with crossed-legged or maybe even on the chair for prolonged period of time. That's gonna impact the flow of blood, energy, and fluids and oxygen. So it's very wise to massage your body before and after meditation. Also, the proper sitting position is important. Many of the monks which have seated in cross-leg position for many hours usually struggle with their feet, their knees, their ankles. And from esoteric Tao perspective, it's more beneficial to sit on the chair, grasping the floor with your feet strongly to ensure that there is energy flow, and it actually stimulates your internal organs, promoting well-being. Also, since we emit energy pretty much all the times, it's useful to grasp your hands correctly. You put the right hand over the left and you grasp it with your tongues and with the fingers both with the fingers from both of the hands to ensure that the energy can flow from one hand to another and there is no energy loss, which is very good practice if you really want to meditate. And if you really want to meditate, ensure that you are in a state that is calm, you're anxious, and you're not actually fighting with yourself. So there are points in the body that you could massage. Usually those are in the wrist, because that will calm the heart, calm the spirit, and ensure the blood will go much more easily. You can just massage it with your thumb, the wrists, for a few minutes, and it would improve your meditation practice because you would be more calm in the mind.
That makes actually a lot of sense. So since discovering meditation, went into breathwork, then from breathwork went into practices like Qigong, etc. Now Qigong is obviously a full kind of, I kind of see it as a mind and body kind of meditation, I guess. You know, you are moving your body as well. So it sounds like actually from Eastern wisdom, they would do, let's say, a practice like Qigong first, and then they would utilize meditation to then explore the mind. Is that correct?
Pretty much, but they would start with Kung Fu to open the energy pathways, then move to basic breathing exercises like the one that stimulate the well-being of the organs. So it's the mind, the body, the breath, and eventually awareness of energy. Then they move to Qigong, and usually then they start meditating. And once that is mastered, a Tai Chi Chuan art is being learned by the novice or adept, which is a sum of it all. And the hardest thing with Tai Chi is that you're not supposed to interfere with the process with your thoughts. It is literally dancing through life, and by experiencing Tai Chi, you can let go of any self-limiting beliefs just by practicing that art correctly.
That moves us on nicely in terms of the different modalities and practices available, because there are a lot from different ancient wisdom kind of cultures, you know, whether it's like the Ayurveda system or Chinese medicine or etc. etc. And you know, there are obviously many more. Where do people begin? Because at times, you know, like I'm somebody who is curious, I guess, in nature, you know, so I'm curious about Qigong, I'm curious about kind of all these other different modalities, and then trying to quote unquote fit them into my day, right? When, you know, we do have the podcast to run, and I do have friends and family to spend time with, and I do have kind of all these other different parts of life, right? Because it's all life, it's all one thing, it's all life to do and to engage in and to hopefully be present in. Um, how does one make time for all of these? Because I'm guessing like they would all have different health and just generally life benefits that you know, I've talking for myself want to cultivate. Um, which can lead to sometimes overwhelm, right? Which is the opposite of what we want. So, where do people begin with these different modalities? What would you recommend?
Slowly, we build it brick by brick, and eventually we'll have a beautiful castle for our soul to live in. But if we would train rigorously from day one, not respecting the body, it would be a tool that would us for the sake of the ego. So you start very slowly. You train few minutes a day, but every day, and eventually with time you can train longer. The Shaolin teaches way of very disciplined training, and they usually start with teaching to train you few times a day, and then it increases to 4 times a day, and 5, and even 6. And it doesn't need to be very long sessions, because it's like putting on the switch that allows the energy to flow through you, because most of us have some pent-up energies that will sooner or later manifest as illnesses. They can be, for example, unprocessed emotions or traumas, and if they are stuck in the body, they will create diseases. So we need that energy either to release or to start flowing in the body. And the more you practice, the more that energy will flow. So if you would want to open the energy pathways, you could either start with practicing from the body perspective. For example, you could do Kung Fu Wu Quan routine, which teaches you the basic forms that opens the energy pathways and prepares the body for harder practices. And they have a saying in Shaolin that you should go easy on Qigong and listen to the body, but once training Kung Fu, ignore being tired and push. And Kung Fu is very similar to yoga because they have the same roots. Shaolin has been started by this great monk, a great sage that traveled from India to China, and he inspired people to the level that they actually begged him to become the headmaster of the Shaolin monastery, and his name was Bodhidharma, and he was from India. So they have the same roots, and you focus on the roots. You build the house from the foundation, not from the roof. And when you are ready, you can start implementing other Kung Fu forms, or maybe even Qigong. Usually people start with Pas de Jin form, which is 8 pieces of brocade, which is very beneficial for the body, and it is a step you can perform. You can also start with esoteric Tao meditation, which are ways to, well, really go deep in the energy aspect of the body, not only to open the channels, the right channels of the body, to process the emotions. I think it's most coherent and biggest program that could have impact on one soul, wealth, health, and well-being, just by using those techniques like iron shirt qigong, fusion of the 5 elements, 6 healing sounds, or even the inner smile. Just smiling internally to your organs will decrease the workload that they have to do during the day, and it's a very good practice to do daily. Just smile and thank your liver, thank your heart, thank your lungs, thank your spleen, and send this energy of smile to them. That would significantly decrease the workload that they have to do.
And so how do people integrate this into their day? What I mean by that is, like, sure, somebody right now could probably just go onto YouTube or Google and type something in, Kung Fu or Qigong, etc. But I think that from my own experience, there's a lot of information out there, some probably good and some probably not so good, right? Because we live in that world. So with all that information and stuff out there, is there a certain resource or a certain place that you would direct people to? Or is it just a case of actually just going on to Google and people doing their own own
Mm.
research?
Well, all flowers bloom in due time. I don't teach Kung Fu, but I teach esoteric Tao meditation, and you can book a time with me on my page, which is called sageandy.com. And if I would encourage someone to practice Kung Fu, I would then advise to find really good teacher or even go to monastery, but in some cases that's obviously not possible. But that art has been very diluted once imported from the East, so it's very hard to find a teacher that can teach you properly, and not even to mention the Qigong or Tai Chi Chuan, which are much more advanced. It happened to yoga as well. Once yoga has been imported from the East, it became another fitness class pretty much. And spiritual people use it as a drug.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Well,
what I was
all I
kind
can
of
say that
sorry, Andy, to interrupt. Yeah, that's what I was kind of alluding to in
Mhm.
terms of like, yeah, just like the best places for obviously people to go. So obviously they can, and I'll link your website and that down below as well. If there's like other resources kind of on this stuff that you've, because we also have to start somewhere, right? So just like the
Mm.
initial places where people can start to to actually understand this, like how it was traditionally um, practiced, and so we really get to the roots.
Well, you need to start with the body if you are on that layer of experiencing reality through the lenses of your survival instinct, of your emotion. That would be best for you. And any activity that gives you joy or gives you this feeling of being grounded will be very beneficial. So you can start dancing, which will also increase your longevity and maybe even increase your awareness. If you want to start on the level of the mind because you have been born on that level, well, you can check my link. I will be more than happy to teach you the ways how to do that properly. You can also start with some retreats with meditation, but I don't feel they're as good as esoteric Tao meditation. I've meditated approximately more than 7,000 hours, and I believe lots of time is lost due to this. I have been trying to force the progress, which is not really the way how things happen. You cannot force spiritual growth. You can only force the growth of the ego, which stands in the contradiction what we want to achieve.
Mm.
So what I would recommend is just sit and start observing you internally, why you do things the way you do things, and how do you feel when you do them, and truly how you think about them and feel about them. Because sometimes we do things and we don't even realize we're doing them. Some people wake up and they don't even understand how it happened that they have coffee in front of them because they didn't have any consciousness about doing that. It has been, they have executed that action so many times that this pattern, this belief, this habit is so integrated within them. It is like a tattoo on their brain, and they don't really need to do anything because that electricity runs through that neurological pathway and bah, they have coffee in front of them.
Yeah, just operating from that habit, right? And they're not fully conscious, so yeah, living consciously and just bringing that awareness to our day-to-day habits and actions is vitally important for what we're talking about here. And yeah, just to live, as I always say, like our best lives. One thing I quickly want to touch on before we bring today's episode to a close is you've mentioned duality a few times. For those who aren't too familiar what duality is, um, yeah, can you give a brief description on what that is?
Duality is this concept of two opposing forces that together became whole and created everything. It is a concept that day becomes night and night becomes day, and the female and the male and the hot and the cold So the essence of life is not get into the extremes, into those dualities. It is similar to a traveler that is sailing in a boat through river, and those extremes, those dualities are on each side of the river as shallow rocks. So if you get caught up in those extremes, those shallow rocks, from side to side, well, you're probably gonna become very anxious, very depressed. The journey would bring you just sadness and grief. And if you would be able to navigate in the middle, stay out of the reach of the rocks, you will truly enjoy this journey, this life, and you will be able to grasp all that's best with your hands. Otherwise, you will be just fighting for survival.
I like that. It kind of reminds me of in terms of the modern world we live in, and especially within the health scene, you kind of like have these two extremes. So, for example, it might be like if we
Mm,
take nutrition, for example, you have like the extremes of nutrition, of certain diets to
mm,
processed foods, etc. And so much noise, and people get kind of caught up in that, confused in that, where it sounds like when we're able to just kind of ignore the extremes, right, and just kind of stay
mm.
in balance and stuff, we're able to flow through life, obviously using the river example there, and not kind of get caught up in the rocks so often. Um, Finally, you work with empaths, I believe. What's an empath?
So, empath is a highly sensitive person that maybe due to some traumatic experience in their childhood became super cautious of the environment. And it's like instead of having 5 fingers, it's like 50 fingers in their hand. When they experience love, it's multiplied. But when they experience anger, it's also multiplied. It's like they are super reactor to things. So obviously it's a double-edged sword because it can make you or it can break you. And since we are so overwhelmed with emotions, we tend to burn really quickly. And since we daydream a lot also because we are ungrounded, that causes us to, especially when interacting with others, that we're overwhelmed by their energy, and we truly don't want to be in that setting, that we would sponge the negative emotion of the third party just to end that interaction. And then that happens, but we didn't do it consciously. So we just stop, our belly sinks, we stop breathing, and we look stupid. And then when we're back home thinking about it, obviously that's not something we wanted to happen. So we plan ahead. We're gonna say this and that. We're gonna do this and that. And we're gonna look different. And we're actually become very social, right? So then that situation happens again. We meet people, and guess what? We stop breathing, our belly sinks, and we freeze. So it starts this vicious cycle of decreasing self-worth and losing respect to one another. Eventually, some empaths are struggling to do even basic things like groceries because they are so overwhelmed with emotion, and it doesn't have to be that way. I've studied different modalities, different herbs, and ways that could allow us to be free and to be immune of those energies. And that is one of my programs, how to teach empaths to be immune to negative emotion, negative suggestions, negative thoughts, negative energies, and negative frequencies. So you can truly just be free and sail free through life and soar high in the sky. And that is the first part of the program. Usually, since we have so much fear or anger, first the fear because we wanted to say something and it didn't happen, and eventually that fear grows into anger towards ourselves that we cultivate. So that is also essential to work through those emotions, to let go, to let go this fear or anger, because sooner or later what we repress will come to the surface and kick us in the butt. So it's very essential that we heal those old wounds, old traumas, because otherwise they would be chaining us down, especially if we want to start a new chapter in our life. We need to put an end to the old chapter. So I'm helping empaths not only to survive but to thrive.
Andy, thank you for your time today. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned so much, and I'm sure our audience have too, especially around like the approach to life of flow, let's call it, and of placing our trust and our faith in the universe. It's something that I've been trying to cultivate more and more. And yeah, when I do get out of like that ego state, it definitely things definitely seem to happen, right? I haven't
Hmm.
yet necessarily found the words yet, but definitely something happens. So thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your time. Where do people go if they want to stay in touch with you and learn more about what you do in your programs?
You can find me on webpage called sageandy.com, or you can DM me directly on Facebook /Empath Catalyst, and I would be more than helpful, more than glad, more than thankful and inspired to work with you to ensure that you are on the right path of life and you can transcend any limitation that you have so you can truly experience the wonders of the universe.
I will link that all down below. But yeah, once again, Andy, thank you for your time today.
Thank you as well. It was a pleasure.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the podcast as we have been exploring the topics of consciousness and Andy's journey with many different ancient practices such as Qigong, Kung Fu, meditation, breathwork, and so many others. It was a very fascinating conversation. Well, I thought it was having the conversation with Andy and learning about his journey so far and what he has learned about not only about spirituality but the role of the mind, right? Like that part of the conversation to me was so fascinating, and I would love to know what did you take away from this episode. So if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment below this episode, or if you're listening on Spotify, then also leave a comment. Without further ado, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. If you got value from this episode, please consider subscribing. Hit that subscribe button, and I will look forward to bringing you another episode of the podcast, same time, same place, next week. See you then.